On behalf of the Friends of the Oak Park Conservatory, we're delighted to welcome you to our final Learn and Grow lecture for the spring. It's been an amazing series. Kayla Chase, our membership chair, who's joining me tonight as our co-host, has put together such a wonderful program. We had Tomatoes 101. Last week we had Suzette talking about square foot gardening. And tonight with Sandy Lentz, we're going to get a sneak peek behind the scenes of the gorgeous plants that are growing in our greenhouses right now. And she will share with us all the tips on companion plants and how you can grow healthy plants in your garden. So it's really been part of our mission. You guys have heard me say this before, that we want to educate and inspire you to become a more confident gardener so that you can go into your garden and you can experiment and not be worried about, messing something up. So in addition to the Learn and Grow lectures that conclude this evening, we have a wonderful program coming up in May featuring West Cook Wild Ones, and Adrian Fisher will do a fantastic talk about native plants that you can grow in your own garden. And so it'll be a really wonderful talk. If you're not familiar with growing natives, she will take us through a very broad discussion about what they are and how you can grow them successfully in your garden. I did mention the plant sale. It is live and open to the public right now. All of the plants are grown in our greenhouses, and we have a really beautiful selection of many unique varieties, edibles, ornamentals. They are annuals. We don't have any perennial plants in our sale, herbs, and veggies. So really a nice selection, and please go shop the sale and support our biggest fundraiser of the year. So let me just turn our attention to Sandy. Sandy Lentz is a gardener since childhood, and she's been a trained University of Illinois Master Gardener since 1999. She served on the initial Oak Park District's Greening Advisory Committee and on the board of the Friends of the Oak Park Conservatory with a term as president. And currently she is in her fourth term as an elected commissioner. Third term, I'm sorry. Third term as an elected commissioner on the board of the Park District of Oak Park. So Sandy has really got this breadth of experience. And then I did want to mention Kayla will be running our presentation tonight. Please put your questions in the chat box, and I will be monitoring the chat while Kayla runs the presentation with Sandy. And then if there's just a cozy group of us, we can unmask and show our video faces, and we could actually talk live with Sandy. She'd love to do that with us later.
Absolutely.
So without further ado, Kayla, would you like to share your screen? And Sandy, I'm going to spotlight you. Janet, I'll get to your, I see people are like, hi, Sandy. Janet, I'll get to your question afterwards, okay? Okay, Sandy, take it away.
Okay.
Give it 1 second and then she'll come back.
Yep. Sorry, guys. We're having some glitches. Sandy is with us, but of course, the second we want to spotlight her. Okay, Sandy, could you start from the top? We lost you in your frozen state for a second there.
Kayla has done a wonderful job of putting the pictures together. And the first one, Kayla, you want to bring that one up? Does that look like anything we've been seeing over the last couple of days? I woke up Monday morning and looked out, and there's snow on the roof. So we're trying very hard to be patient about our spring gardening and let the daffodils and the other things that are tolerant of all of this nonsense come up and be just fine, but not start planting our tomato plants until weather gets a little warmer. We've had snow, we've had 70 degrees. It's supposed to be maybe close to 80 this weekend. Don't plant your tomato plants yet. So what's a gardener to do when we're all just so itchy to be outside, to be doing things and making our gardens grow? And some of us, however, myself included, have already been gardening. Next slide, Kayla. We have, and if you come in as early as the second week in February, when it is nothing but slush and grunge and cold, wet weather, which it still seems to have been. But we get to go behind the scenes and begin to do some of the work that it takes to make this sale a success. Next, Kayla. There. And that's a lot of what we do. Everything from planting the tiniest little seedlings. And if you've ever seen a leek seedling, you do not want to be engaged in transplanting them. They are like as fine as little hairs. But when we get them transplanted from their first little seed beds, we wind up with wonderful vegetables that will be part of our sale. Next. Now, we have two key things that are really important about getting ready to plant our beautiful plants from the conservatory. And that is that our soil needs to be prepared. On the left is one of my celadon green ceramic planters. And what you need to do to get ready to put plants in your pots or in your planters is to dump out all of last year's soil that's in there. And the reason for it is
All right, we're going to pause. She'll be back with us in a second. We've got a frozen presenter here, folks. So Sandy, can you back up just for a few seconds and talk to us about what you did to prepare your planter?
First thing that needs to happen is to get fresh soil in it. So you can get a tarp, dump it out, and make sure that whatever is in the bottom, that there is plenty of drainage, and then fill it. Before you fill it, you should clean it with a 10% solution of, I use Clorox, but of that kind of material, and make sure that it's all washed out and then rinsed out, because there can be diseases in there. And so if the pot is clean and you put fresh potting soil in it, you'll be ready to go with your new plants. Next to it is a picture of one of my raised beds. I can't clean them with Clorox solution, but I can put fresh soil in them. For my raised beds, I use a bag of mushroom compost every year to refresh the soil.
I do the same thing with my raised beds. I actually replace like some of the soil on top too, just as Sandy was saying. So
exactly. Next, once the key thing is, again, your soil is the foundation of your plants. And so this is one of those places where inexpensive materials don't do you any favors. So once you have your little seedlings and you're ready to put them outside, whether they're seedlings that you have grown inside or whether they're the plants that you're bringing back happily from the plant sale, you need to harden them off. And what that means is that, and particularly now when the weather has been pretty chilly, if you buy peppers or tomatoes or impatiens from the sale, they will have lived happily and warmly in the conservatory since they were started. And they will not be happy if you bring them in to your yard and just leave them outdoors before you plant them in your pot or in your raised bed or in your flower beds. Because it's even with the light that's in the conservatory and even with the warmth, it's the change to the outdoor weather is substantial. And if the plants have been in a nice warm place and all of a sudden they get outdoors and it's 50 and the wind is blowing, they're not going to be really happy. And they may, if the weather drops too much in the evening, they may wind up not making it at all. And then you're mad at us because we sold you plants that didn't make it. So we don't want that to happen. And as a consequence, what you need to do is harden them off. And what that means is taking your plants outside in a shady spot for a couple of hours during the middle part of the day, and the next day, and then taking them back inside, bringing them out the next day and maybe give them an extra half an hour, but gradually accustom them to being outdoors in the light, in the wind, in the rain, so that they are accustomed to those things when you put them in their final places. And that's really, really important because our plants are beautiful. And I was looking at some of the tomatoes today, and they are big and strong and mean looking, but they're indoors where it's warm. So it's really important to gradually accommodate them to being outside in the wind and in the rain and in your particular beds. Next, Kayla. Yay, we will see some sunshine. And again, accommodating your plants to the brighter light, even though you think your own grow lights or your lights in the conservatory are bright, the sun is substantially brighter than that. And that point
about that, but yeah, that's actually a key important point is during the hardening off process is making sure it's shady, because the sun is incredibly bright in comparison to whatever grow lights you have, regardless how close that they are. But go ahead, Sandy.
Exactly. Thanks, Kayla. One of the key things that we need to know, and again, stuff we can do in the winter, as we plan our gardens, things we can do now when it's gray and wet, is to figure out exactly what our plants need in terms of one of the very key things, which is how much light do they need. And how we find that out. A rough rule of thumb is full sun, which is a term we've all heard, is 6 hours of direct sun every day. Well, obviously not when it's pouring, but when the sun is out. Part sun or part shade is less, between 3 and 6 hours. And shade is anything less than 3 hours of sun a day. And that can be sheltered by a tree, your tree branches, by your house next door or whatever. But those things are really key. And if you put a plant that needs full sun under a heavily canopied tree, it's not going to do very well. By the same token, if you plant a fern out in the strip between the sidewalk and the street, it's not going to be very happy either because it doesn't need that bright light. So one of the things you can do is to, and I'm going to ask Kayla to put up my chart. It's a little hard to read, but one of the things you can do on the solstice on the 21st of June is make yourself a chart. Down the left-hand side, you'll see time everywhere from 7 in the morning to 8 at night. And across the top, this is one of my own charts, is a couple of different beds. There's the south house bed. There's the south fence shade bed. There's the herb patch. And every hour, go outside and look. Look at those garden beds and see, is the sun shining on them? Is the tree with its leaves covering most of it? Or is it really in the shade? And if you do it every single hour, feels like a big job, do it every single hour, you will see, for example, that the south house bank from 9 to 10 to 11 to 12, it's full sun. That's 4 hours. And then you look further down and later in the afternoon, you get 2 more sunny hours. So that's 6. So that particular bed gets 6 hours of direct sun a day. So plants that need that much sun can be planted there. The same thing is true with my herb patch. It's all sun and herb.
So additionally, that the PSH, that's partial shade. So that's why that middle column is going to be a shade bed, because you can see there's only 3 hours of that direct sun.
Exactly. And that it's interesting that is a fence along a fence line, and that's a shade bed. It gets some sun, but it's mostly pretty shady because of the house next door. And I was surprised when I did this a couple of years ago to discover that particular bed was a lot shadier than I thought it was. It's on the south side of my property. Why isn't it full sun? Well, it's not. And that's why it's really important to know what kind of light your various garden areas have. And you'll be surprised, and it'll change. The next door neighbor cuts their tree down. Somebody builds a McMansion on the other side of you, and all of a sudden you've got a lot more shade. So things do change, and this can be a useful exercise every 4 or 5 years to see what your garden beds are really like. And you'll be changing out what's in them anyway. But this can really be, I think, can really be very helpful. The next slide is, how do you know what a particular plant needs? Well, here's one of the tags from our heliotrope that's in our sale that we've had for a very long time, and it smells wonderful. But look at the top, part sun. So you don't want to put it somewhere where it's getting 6, 7, 8 hours of sun, direct sun a day. You want to put it somewhere where it's part sun. So if there's a tree that has dappled leaves, and so the area underneath it gets a fair amount of sunshine, but is shielded, for example, in the middle of the day, that would be a perfect place to put that heliotrope. And you'll find that information in a number of places. And particularly for the sale, it's on the plant tags. And there are tags in every single plant that's on those benches that we are selling. So if one's fallen out, go get a volunteer and have them make sure, never buy a plant that doesn't have a tag on it. And then I always recommend people, hopefully before, but at least when you're in the process of getting ready to figure out where you're going to plant it, read the tag. There's a lot of information, not just on the front, but in the back. Read the tag. Go off, sit down, have a cup of coffee. Read the tag. There's a lot of information on that tag about how tall the plant gets, about how wide a spacing it needs. So if you put it too close to something, it's going to get too crowded. There's a lot of information in there. And so take advantage of the information that's in the tags that are provided to us by the developers of these.
That's actually one of the most overlooked things that we find at the plant sale is people don't look at those key, like the amount of sun it needs or the size it needs. And then it comes back and then, they're like, oh, my plant didn't do so well. It was like, well, take advantage of the information that's provided.
Exactly. And there are a lot of good sources. The key thing, I think, is if you're looking online for information about a particular plant and somebody's trying to sell you something about it, have your detectors up to see whether that information is accurate or not. If it's information that's coming from another state, from California, for example, their climate is different. So you may not find that the information that they are providing about a particular plant will survive here in Illinois. So that's why we've been really careful with the plants we've picked to choose ones that will do well in our summers, which can be in very warm and also very wet. Next slide, Kayla, please. There. One of my favorite resources, and that has an amazing amount of wonderful information, is the Missouri Botanical Gardens, what they call their plant finder. You don't need the botanical name. All you need in this instance is basic search, Swiss chard. We are growing Swiss chard, growing bright lights, which is on the right-hand side of that. It tells you it's an annual, what zone it grows in, how tall it gets, synonyms for it, all sorts of information about that particular kind of plant. And there's more further down on the page. So if you are interested in a particular plant, Missouri Botanical Garden does a wonderful job. And even though it's Missouri as opposed to Illinois, our plants, we know, for example, what zone our plants grow in. We're roughly 5B at this point. So we know that this information is going to be solid and accurate and applicable to our particular plants that we grow in, that we've grown for the sale. So that's another place. Now the fun part, let's talk about some of the plants. Kayla, what's next? Okay. One of the beautiful things is to put orange and purple together. And if you have hanging baskets in an eave, in a nice shady spot, or maybe even tuck under the branches of a tree, here are two plants that do beautifully in the shade and will provide really bright color. The Begonia, Santa Cruz, and I will pronounce the long name, but that's Coleus. Solenostemon scutellorides is the long name for Coleus, and this particular one is called trailing plum. I suspect many of you have, Coleus has flowers which are pretty insignificant. So if you pinch them out from the center, the plant will continue to provide its beautiful, interestingly colored leaves. And the begonia can be deadheaded. Let's talk about deadheading for a minute. Most of us know about it if we've gardened at all, but basically deadheading means taking finished flowers out of a plant, off of a plant, pinching it off, cutting them back, so that the plant doesn't decide that it really wants to go to seed and make seeds in those flowers. And then you never get any more flowers. So one of the things that's important to do is to be able to take those flowers off when they're done, so that the plant thinks, oh, I guess I have to make some more flowers. So here's a purple and orange combination that I think is really pretty. And next, Kayla, in our vegetable garden, here is you can use a contrast of foliage. Sun gold tomato on the left, and those are from the picture that I took in the conservatory this morning. Have you ever seen such healthy tomato plants? They're just amazing. And next to it is our fern leaf dill. And if you've ever grown dill, you'll always have it because it comes back all over the place. And it also is a plant that the swallowtail butterfly caterpillars just love. So get an extra plant of dill, put it in your vegetable garden. The contrast of foliage between the ferny stuff and the stronger, bigger leaves is really very attractive. And you'll have dill for the caterpillars as well. Let some of the dill go to seed and scatter it. Mine lives in my raised bed where my tomatoes are, and you'll always have dill coming back up the next spring. It's not a perennial, but it self-seeds, and you'll always have dill. And if you have too much, it's very easy to pull out. Next, please. Here's one of my favorites. I love marigolds. They're not natives, and I'm a big fan of natives, and the next talk we'll talk about those. But the strawberry blonde marigolds are just really beautiful, and that's one plant with all those different colored flowers. One of the things that you can do with a strawberry blonde marigold is use it as an edging for a vegetable garden. There's nothing that says you can't put flowers in vegetable gardens or vegetables in flower gardens. And this makes a beautiful edge. It's low growing. It has the marigold scent, which some people think chases away tomato problems.
Yeah, these marigolds actually don't get very tall. They're about 8 to 10 inches tall.
Mhm.
So it's pretty nice. It's a nice, like as Sandy's saying, a nice edging.
It makes a lovely border, or you can mass them and fill a whole garden area with that. Next is the vegetable garden. We put the dill in there, and another combination is, if you're going to do it in a pot, you can put kale, or in this case, chard bright lights, right into a pot with salvia with beautiful red flowers, and the two will look really pretty together. When you're doing a pot, it doesn't have to be the standard thriller, filler, spiller. You can put something like the beets off to one side and then fill it with other plants. Next. Oh, here's a fun one. If you want to do a really patriotic pot, you can use the Angelonia, and we have it in two colors, the bright red and the blue, and then pair it with the white alyssum. And that's another favorite plant of mine. It comes in a 4-pack, so you get 4 plants, and it's another beautiful edging. I put mine in front of some roses, and it's so warmly scented that it really smells wonderful, and it lasts a very long time. When we've talked about deadheading, one of the things you can do with the alyssum is just kind of shear off the flowers when they're finished. Take some grass shears and just cut those off, and they will come back. And the same thing is true when you've finished with, like the marigolds. You can snip those dead flowers off, and then there will be more that will come in to follow them. So you'll have flowers all summer. Next. Oh, and this one's fun. They look like, this is spilanthes, and they look like lollipops almost, but they are also under our edible category. And you think, why would I eat those? Well, these were called, another name for them is toothwort, because if you put one of those flowers in your mouth gently, it would numb the place where you had a toothache. So I'm not sure I'm recommending any of that, but they're beautiful and really interesting flowers. And you can match them with, Kayla, what comes next? Here's another one that's really interesting. And this one's a succulent. And I'll bet that you could pot it up in the fall or even leave it in a big pot, bring it in for the winter, and you have a lovely succulent. And this one's a brand new one. We've never grown this before. The leaves are kind of thick and leathery, and they're outlined in yellow. And they're really just, I think it's really pretty. And then they have these fluffy red.
These actually used to grow when I lived in San Diego, and those purple or those pink flowers, when they're exposed to that full sun, they almost are blinding. They're like,
Wow.
they're such a bright, almost like sometimes borderline hard to look at color. If in enough sun. I don't know if we get enough sun this far north, but anyway, they're absolutely a beautiful plant. Just the contrast between the fluffy flower and the thick leaves, as Sandy was saying.
These are plants that are unusual. And that's one of the stars of our plant sale, is that we have a lot of things that you can't find anywhere else, not even, certainly not in the big boxes and not even in the more sophisticated nurseries. We have all kinds of just amazing stuff that just isn't available elsewhere, and that has been grown with the loving care of all of our volunteers and not in, crates in some plant manufactory somewhere. So next, let's talk about, here's another one. If you find a place where you put a chair and you want something that smells good, the lemon verbena has a wonderful scent. The leaves do smell like lemon, and people dry them and use them in potpourri and other places. And you can put those again along with the alyssum, and you have a wonderfully scented area to sit and read a book or drink some iced tea or just watch your garden. Next. Pretty in pink. We have lots of pink flowers this year, and those pink flowers and those plants, if you read the tags, are for sun. So the calibrachoa is kind of like will remind you of a petunia, and it's wonderful in baskets. It trails. If you've got a place where there's a little bit of a wall, you can plant it behind it and it will trail color over the wall. And the standard issue, I think everybody likes geraniums. The interesting part of geraniums is that they're not geraniums, they're pelargoniums. And geraniums are a whole nother bunch of plants that are perennials, but these guys are just this beautiful apple blossom pink and will be beautiful in your garden, planted along with, whether they're planted along with calibrachoas or something else entirely. Next, purples. You can do, again, here's a nice combination of not only colors, but textures. Cleome can get tall. It has wonderfully interesting seed pods as the plant just grows up and the flowers continue as the plant rises. Gomphrena are plants that make these wonderful drumstick flowers. And actually the flowers are those little tiny yellow things that you see in the center. And those can be dried for interesting winter displays, and they hold their color beautifully. Terenia is not.
Just briefly, the little plum, the Gomphrena, they actually hold their color when they're dried. So as she was saying, they do make really interesting arrangements afterwards. Go ahead.
And the Terenia is, I think it's kind of got it almost looks like a little face with the tongue sticking out, but that tongue is a landing pad for all of the insects that like to come and pollinate it or get nectar from them. So you'll find a lot of plants like that have something in the flower that makes it a guide for the insects that need to come and pollinate them. Next, here's my favorite. And I've already put my order in, so I know that I will be getting some of these. Verbenas are beautiful multi-flowered flower heads, and we have several, but this one is blue and purple, and these plants do beautifully, not only in our gardens, but in our pots as well, and they trail, and they're just absolutely lovely. So that's for starts. I suspect there are lots of questions. And if I can have 30 seconds, I need to plug my iPad in because it's claiming that it's beginning to get low. So while you're getting the questions ready, let me go get my plug.
Like when you're in the greenhouse helping grow them, it's one thing, you know, when you're trying to like repot like little tiny hairs, but it's another thing to see them blooming. It's like, it's so much more exciting. All right. And don't forget, guys, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. But we do have a small group, so we could probably ask what's in the chat and then maybe open it up to questions and maybe a bit more of a dialogue instead.
Kayla, thank you so much for tag teaming with Sandy.
That's awesome.
Kayla worked with Sandy to put this presentation together. So she, in addition to being a master gardener, Kayla is a master gardener. She and Sandy worked hand in hand to pull the presentation together. So I appreciate you popping in and keeping the conversation going. So we did have a few questions that came in.
There we go.
Beginning. Hi, Sandy, you back?
Hi, I'm back, and my iPad is not going to quit on me.
So great. So
Take questions.
going back to the soil that was in my planter from last year, can you just take us through that again? Do I have to dump out all of that soil in my planter and not use it again? Where do I put it, and why do I have to discard it altogether?
Well, excuse me. What's in that pot you've had fairly closely planted plants. And that's the reason that you need to dump it, because the nutrients are basically, even if you've been putting dilute fertilizer in every couple of weeks, which is what I recommend, you're still going to have soil that's depleted of many of its nutrients. And so in order to have the best possible start for your new plants, you need to dump it out, clean it out, make sure that you've used your cleaner, and then put fresh potting soil in it. Don't dig soil out of your garden, because you'll wind up with all kinds of potential diseases and critters and other things. You want potting soil. And I like it as pure as possible. So I don't want it with a lot of additional additions or nutrients, or, oh, it comes with this or that. You want just plain potting soil. Comes in bags, and you can get it at any good nursery. And that's the reason.
The depleted soil, can that go in my compost?
You can put some of it in your compost.
Okay.
You can dump it in a garden bed.
Okay.
Because it will be mixed in with other things like your compost and your other nutrients. You don't have to throw it out, but it just won't feed your plants well.
Okay. Sue, Sandy did go through a bit of that idea of hardening off. Sue's question is, what is the best way to hold plants until we put them in the ground? And I think Sandy explained holding them in your home, bringing them out, and gradually building up that time so that they're comfortable in the.
People have, for example, a unheated porch that gets a fair amount of light, because you don't want to put them in a dark place. They've been getting a lot of light, so you would want to put them somewhere where they will get a reasonable amount of light. We will be picking them up in May. Judy, give me the dates. I think it's the 5th and 6th.
10th, 11th, and 12th are our pickup days, right? So early May.
Yeah, by that time, things should be pretty well ready, even for the most heat sensitive plants to go outdoors. But again, the outdoors is different than the conservatory has been. So you need to harden them off. And I've got a shady spot next to my house right near where the basement door is. And my plants go under some grow lights, which is where I start seeds. And I just tuck them under there and then put them out every day for at least a little bit longer, for close to a week, until they get hardened off. And if you get a really hard pounding rain, then you don't want them out initially until they're used to it.
So again, follow up to that is when to plant them in the ground. So can you give us I hear different things each year. I hear wait till Memorial Day. Is it a soil temperature thing? How can we judge when it would be the best time to actually plant them in our pots and in the ground once we get the plants hardened off?
Some plants are more sensitive to temperature than others. So those are ones that most people wait for. And you watch the news and you watch your weather reports. And if it's going to be in the 60s and 70s, that should be just fine for the plants to go outside. But like now, for example, some people suggest that we don't do much of anything in terms of trimming things back in our gardens until after it has been at least 50 degrees for overnight. And of course, we haven't had that. So it's still been very, very cold.
Mhm.
So again, I hate to say it's kind of what feels right. But if you've got a day when it's 65, 70 degrees, and it's going to be in those degrees for the next few days, for the next week, it's probably okay. And that is tomato plants and peppers too.
Oh, I'm so excited. The vegetables, get them in. Okay, let's see. Walter Stoller was asking, nearly all flowers are annuals. The plants that we're selling at the Friends of the Oak Park Conservatory plant sale are primarily annuals.
Mhm.
And as Sandy mentioned earlier, there might be something like dill that will self-seed, and so
Mhm.
it'll feel like it'll come back. Was there there's nothing else, maybe fennel is another one that would
We
come
don't
back.
we don't have fennel this year. What we do have, however, is chives.
Okay,
And chives is a very sturdy perennial that will come back routinely. My chive plants have been in my garden for years and years, and they come back very early in the spring. But we're doing some different things this year in the last couple of years with our various kinds of plant sales. For example, last summer we had the conservatory had a sale of native plants because people are more and more interested in them. And so the park district, which we're of course partner with, the park district decided let's put some natives out. And so they did some natives, and most of those native plants that were sold then are perennials.
right.
But for the traditional Friends of the Conservatory plant sale, most of our plants are in fact annuals. And that's one of the things why I mentioned deadheading in particular, because you don't want a plant that has
So deadheading will keep the energy of the plant.
because the plant's trying to reproduce itself. That's what's going on. And if it can't, if the flowers are off and it can't make seed, it's looking around and saying, well, I guess I better make some more flowers. So that's really what's going on. Some plants are a little different with regard to that. The Cleome, for example, has a really interesting growth habit. So you don't deadhead it because the flowers keep coming as the plant up through the plant, as the plant grows vertically. The flowers continue to grow at the top, and then you wind up with these interesting seed pods. So if you're not sure, you can always ask, you can always look, you can call the conservatory, you can go online and say, do I need to deadhead this particular plant? And you can get lots of good information. Another place too is the University of Illinois. The extension has lots and lots of useful, accurate information that you can get.
Yeah, for some reason, I just started following the Illinois Extension on Facebook, and it's like, where have I been? Why have I not been following them? It is every time they post something, it is fantastic, relevant information for this time of year. It's just such an excellent source. So for sure, if you're on Facebook, I highly recommend the University of Illinois Extension is another resource. I'm asking folks if you have other questions or want to unmute and say hi. And ask us, tell us what you've already purchased, and, tell us what you're excited about. I've already placed 2 orders, but now that I saw Sandy's full presentation, there are more things I need to go take a look at because I need to kind of review everything. But yeah, I mean,
somebody
Sandy,
would-
thank you so
yes.
much for pulling together. First of all, Sandy is one of our longtime volunteers who's worked on this plant sale. I don't even know how long, Sandy. It's been
We
many
think this
years.
is some odd years, and I think I've been doing it for at least 20 of that.
Okay.
That's
And
awesome.
mostly to get in out of the slush in February and begin
Yeah.
to work on little green things.
Yeah.
But it's a great fundraiser, and as I said, you can have plants that you could never find anyplace else.
Yeah.
And
I just didn't know there's so many variety. I mean, seriously, I did not realize there were so many unique varieties.
Mhm.
I just go to the ones that I'm familiar with. And so this helps me kind of get out of my comfort zone very much, just knowing what these plants are a little bit more. So
Mhm.
I'm really glad that we did this. So the sale is open, I think, till early next week. We'll probably send one more email blast out about it. But if you have any other questions or want to say hello, feel free to unmute. But I want to extend a deep thank you to Sandy for everything you did for the plant sale and for this presentation tonight, and for Kayla. Thank you so much for helping with our tech side tonight.
as you
And-
probably figured out, I can do content all day long, but to the technical stuff, I am just, that's just not my thing. So